Hey, so today I'm going to weave myself a hat made out of cattail. I got my cattail in the river, some little crayfish crawling on it. I got down to the river here about an hour and a half ago, chucked the cattail in, went for a swim, set up my camera gear, and yeah, it's been about an hour and a half, should be really pliable and ready to work. But before I get going with that, I just want to go over a few important details. So number one, please do not mistake me for one of those goons who is terrified of the sun. The sun is wonderful. But sometimes you're out in the middle of the day and you didn't plan it and you just need a bit of shade on your face. I actually have a hat, but I didn't make it, so I'm gonna make this one. Number two, it's really important to dry out your cattail before you rehydrate it and weave with it. This is really true of basically all basketry materials. However, you can kind of get away with it a little more weaving willow or other barks. But with cattails, the first time they dry, they shrink a lot. And so if you made a project with them fresh, it's going to become very holy, which perhaps if you are religious may be ideal for its holiness, but probably it's going to suck. So dry them out first and then rehydrate them and they'll weave much better. Number three is that it would probably be better for me to make a cedar bark hat. I have cedar bark at the house and it would certainly be more durable in the long run. However, it just takes a little bit longer to process, whereas cattail are already in perfect weavable strips. Cedar bark, at least a quarter of the time spent on the project would be actually just getting your pieces ready. And given that I haven't made a hat before, I figure I'll start with cattails, and that way, if it turns out terribly wrong, I didn't waste as much time. That being said, I do have experience with cattails, actually. Hold on. I wove this the other day, a little berry picking basket. So I figure a hat shouldn't be much more difficult. Just this upside down, a little bigger on my head, Yeah, I think that's all. Okay, let's start the weaving process. Okay, so first things first, I'm gonna take all the pieces I want to use right away and just flatten them out. You can use a rolling pin for this or a stick. I'm just running it through my fingers, bending it almost 90 degrees after your hand. Just helps them weave a little flatter and nicer. Now what I'm gonna do is start making a little, crisscrossy base. So, and there's nothing fancy about this. You just crisscross them. You can do patterns with this. You can do, 2 over, 2 under. You can use different colors, but I'm just crisscross. That's it today. So now I got some crisscrosses going on, and I'm going to take the sticky outies and just make sure that each piece is sitting right kind of in the middle of where I want it to be, so that, because these side pieces are going to have to go down and form the sides and then the brim of the hat. So I just want to make sure that they're all going to be long enough. I've also alternated, so each piece, the butt end is on one side, the thin end is on the other, and then I've switched it each time. So I'm just going to go through and make sure all these are in the right position. Okay, now I'm going to start twining. So I'm going to take my weaver piece and just make sure it's nice and flattened. And then I'm going to find, you don't always want to twine with all of the fattest part. I might end up cutting it like around where it's thickest, but I got to get up to get my knife. So for now, I'll just show you this. You're going to want to find a midpoint like that. Give it a little fold, even give it a little twist. And then we can just start anywhere. let's start here. So we snug it into, just want to keep these all nice and tight. That's just kind of an art to keeping it tight until it is ready to hold itself, which is what this weaver will start to do. Okay, so we got our weaver in place right here. The side coming from the bottom goes on top with a little twist, and the side above goes underneath the next one, like so. Okay, so one more time. We got our piece coming underneath here. We give it a twist and just let it sit on top. That's gonna come undone. The one on top, we give it a twist, more twist, and then put it underneath like so. And for now, we're not gonna try and make any conical shape just yet. We're just gonna keep doing this around, and it'll start to take a shape that you'll see. All right, so now I've done one full lap around the perimeter. I got my next one ready to go, but this time I've lifted it up, put it on my water bottle. So I'm gonna start now doing the same thing, except for starting to create a bit of shape, starting to bring the ends down, especially on the corners. That's where you're gonna see this effect start to really take place. There we go. So now you see the corners just starting to take shape just a little bit there. And as we keep going, it should hopefully fan out in a fashion that will be conducive to a head fitting into it. So I did a few more laps, putting more weavers in, and now I've tied up all of them like this, because I figure if I want it to start to take this shape, I might as well guide the spokes that way. And yeah, so at the corners, it's kind of starting to slowly meld together. Okay, I'm just gonna record this corner splicing process one more time. So, getting a new weaver, or no, well, I guess it's not a weaver, it's a spoke. I don't know, it's for every kind of basketry, the words are different. And I'm gonna fold it mostly in half, like so. And then I'll just put it aside for now and show you. So this is where the corner naturally is. These are the two corner pieces. What I want to do is add this basically like that. So it's gonna, because it's folded, there's basically two more spokes coming out. And so I'm going to just chuck it in. And it's not really going to be locked in on this first go around. Oh, actually, I can. Yeah. I'm just going to do it. And hopefully you can kind of make sense of it. So, there we go. Now it's in. Just like that. And I'm going to go around and do that on all four corners. And I'm thinking that's going to give me enough width on the crown as I come down. And yeah, we're getting there. But it's starting to rain, so I'm going to go home. All right, so I brought my hat home last night, and I wove like crazy. This is what it looks like at the moment. As you can see, I added a lot of length, and I've added a lot more. I've spliced in a lot more sort of V extra pieces into the corners because it was turning out to be a lot smaller than I expected. In fact, at one point, I had to strip off like half a dozen rows because I put it on my head and it was just, more like a Pope hat than a real hat. So yeah, I'm starting to think that the crown, what I did here, I could have made it just a little bit wider before I began going around in circles. But it's not a big deal, I reckon, because like if you look at this hat, for example, you know, a hat. Hi, Rumi. Rumi's jealous. He wants to be on the camera. He's a good boy. Go on, buddy. Go on. But this hat, for example, you know, the absolute crown goes right up to, like, it pokes out like crazy. And then when you put it on your head, you kind of like sink it down. So I figure with this, all I'm gonna do is keep widening it as I go. And then at some point it'll fit on my head. I've been doing this. So like right now, the top kind of sinks in a little bit and then touches my head. And yeah, that's okay. It'll give me that sort of cowboy hat look, I reckon. I hope. So yeah, at this point, it's already getting quite tall though, so I'm gonna do another round and add maybe one more fork on each corner, as well as maybe even in the middles. I really need to start widening it out. And then I think it should be okay. To be honest, last night, I kind of, you know, you're working on your project for a long time and you want to get it done. And so I was weaving pretty fast, and some of my work is pretty scrappy. But I think it'll be fine. It'll work and repel the sun and keep me in the shade. So, yeah, I'm gonna get back to it. Okay, so I've got to this point where I think the crown of the hat is tall enough. I'm not really in love with the shape, how it flares out so much. Doesn't feel like it fits on my head very well that way, as if like only this bottom part is really actually fitting snugly. But focus, you bugger. Well, I don't know. I'll finish the brim now, and I guess we'll just see what happens. And for the brim, I think it's pretty straightforward, but I'll show you anyways. All I'm gonna do is take more weavers, and instead of twining like I did for this whole part, I'm gonna plait like I did on the top, and basically just go under, over, under, over. When you slide it up, it'll create that nice texture like you see on the top. And yeah, I'm just gonna do that all the way out until it looks like a hat. We'll see what happens. All right, so here's a little overdub for you while I lash the brim together. I figure the easiest thing here is to just look at what I'm doing and copy it if you like. I think there's different ways you can go about doing this. I just looked at some photos online and kind of made this up. I think it makes sense. I know there's ways you can sort of double them back on themselves and use like a small rope or twine cordage to maybe secure them in a little more fancy fashion. This is a little more crude, but I think it works just fine. And at the end, I'll just snip them all, and that's it. All right, so it's been a few weeks now since I finished weaving the brim on what is now this hat. And, well, it's a hat. As I was kind of finishing it up, it wasn't turning out exactly as I'd hoped, as perfect as I would have liked it. For one, it doesn't fit on my head very well. It tapers, you know, to the point where it does fit my head, but there's not enough mass there for my head to kind of grip it. And also, as I was getting to the bottom of the crown here, as well as the brim itself, I ended up really saturating the cattails and weaving them very wet. I don't know why, I just ended up doing that. And as such, I've ended up with a hat, as it dried, that's got a lot of holes in it, essentially, which isn't the end of the world. If anything, it's stylistic, perhaps. But yeah, I've picked berries in this hat, and the more I've worn it, actually, the more it's grown on me. I yeah, it's all right for a first go. You know, if anything, actually, it's interesting because it doesn't fit on my head well, and yet because there's a lot of holes in it, the wind doesn't blow it off as readily because it's not a flat, solid sail. The wind gets through the holes, so that's kind of helpful. But being a bit of a perfectionist and wanting to give it another go, I thought, all right, I'll take what I've learned and I'll make another hat. So, hat number 2 looks like this. And it turned out, I would say, a lot better. You know, some things I did differently were I made the crown of the hat a lot bigger. On this first one, I ended up on every single, here, let's try and make sense of this. On every single corner, as it came down, like, you know, on each of these shoots, I ended up adding in, like, I want to say 5 or 6 sort of V pieces to enable the brim to become wider, because I started off with a pretty small top to the crown, whereas this one is much bigger on top. I also on this one figured out that as the weavers, when you're twining this part of the crown, as they're finishing, you can just weave them right in and spin them right into the new weavers, which would probably make the hat fit together a little better, so that these little stray pieces you have inside here that I should probably clip, they're not going to fall apart as easy. But it's not a big deal because these hats are pretty disposable anyway. They're not meant to last forever. Sorry, they're not disposable. They're just not meant to last forever. But the main thing that I fixed on this hat was that I wove the cattail as dry as I was able to. So I soaked it for probably an hour or two and then kept it out of the water, and just every piece I would sort of re-moisturize with my fingers before I wove it. And that way they were only just wet enough to weave and not break, but not wet enough to shrink a lot when they dried. And I kind of like that. It ended up making a much more opaque brim, especially. So that was good. What else? It looks good. I still did add a few, splices as I went down the corners here. Maybe 2 or 3, because it was already a bit bigger. And that way there's a large section of brim that grips my head, which is nicer. So something I've noticed now that I've made these 2 hats is that I feel like I finally understand how I would go about making probably the best cattail hat. And what really would change is trying to make the top of the crown more circular, because as you add in these little wings on the side that expand the volume of the crown and make it, big enough to fit your head, they generally tend to warp a lot. And create it doesn't come into a nice circular shape. It kind of like warps into this weird rectangular shape, at least when I was doing it. And so for this hat in particular, it's shaped quite nicely now, but I actually soaked the whole brim of the hat till it was totally saturated, and then tried to kind of smush it into a shape that was a little bit better suited to my head. And it turned out fine, but I feel like, yeah, I finally understand how you would go about making a crown somewhere between these 2 in size that would turn out circular and enable the hat to just be a little bit like the perfect hat. But to be honest, I'm kind of sick of making hats. So at some point in the future, maybe I'll make another updated video. But for now, I would say this one is fine, and I can go and be out in the sun to my heart's content. Anyways, that's all. Yeah, thanks for tuning in.